Tonight, a National Centre for Disease Control to be established in Canberra to prepare for future pandemics. Yuma, good evening. I'm Adrienne coming to you from Ngunnawal country, and we also acknowledge others with connections to the lands of the ACT. This is ABC News. Also tonight, Elizabeth Lee to face off against Jeremy Hanson for the leadership of the Canberra Liberals. A woman who spent hours wedged upside down in a rock crevice reunited with her rescuers. And the Canberra Capital's optimistic about the upcoming season despite a young and inexperienced side. Australia's COVID-19 response so deeply eroded public trust, people may not accept restrictions like lockdowns during any future crisis. That's the finding of an independent inquiry which hailed courageous decisions taken by leaders at the outset of the pandemic, but said cracks started to emerge as the crisis wore on. It's also recommended a National Centre for Disease Control be established here in Canberra. Here's political reporter Stephanie Dalzell.
Silent cities, shops shuttered and hospitals overwhelmed. Generations changed by a once-in-a-century pandemic.
The striking conclusion, I think, from this report, though, is that right now we are arguably worse placed as a country to deal with a pandemic than we were in early 2020.
The report finding Australia's response to the pandemic drove a large decline in public trust.
Many of the measures taken during COVID-19 are unlikely to be accepted by the population again.
Delays in the vaccine rollout, prolonged restrictive public health measures and ultimately cost $31 billion. And the report said some of those measures, like school closures and lockdowns, must be used carefully.
Because of the strength of the public health response, a lot of people felt, they didn't trust what government was doing.
Heavy-handed restrictions also amounted to a lack of compassion, according to the inquiry. That's something acutely felt by Richard Smith, whose wife was in an aged care home. His family was unable to see her for months.
The distress was not only felt by the residents, but by the family to see the distress that their loved ones were going through.
But despite all the issues, the report stressed Australia fared well compared to other nations.
We saved lives and we saved livelihoods, and I think Australians should be proud.
One of the recommendations has already been acted on, funding a Centre for Disease Control.
An opportunity to lay a foundation for Australia's future pandemic preparedness.
The toughest decisions on lockdowns, school and border closures and vaccine mandates were made by the states and territories and weren't directly covered by this inquiry. But even so, it was highly critical of poorly justified and disproportionate approaches to restrictions across the country. With goodwill deeply eroded, the report plants serious doubt about whether a less trusting public would even follow better targeted rules in the case of another pandemic. Stephanie Dalzell, ABC News, Canberra.
With the final makeup of the ACT Legislative Assembly now known, the Canberra Liberals are looking to the future. After a 7th consecutive election loss, the party is preparing to vote on who should lead them for the next 4 years in opposition.
The stage has been set for a rematch between two former foes.
I can confirm today that I will be putting my hand back up for the leadership. I still believe that I'm the best person to lead the Canberra Liberals to the 2028 election.
Last week, former party leader Jeremy Hanson revealed he would make a tilt for the top job.
I'll be putting my hand up for the leadership of the Canberra Liberals, looking forward to 2028.
Mr Hanson led the party to a 2016 election loss, delivering 11 seats and a 2.2% swing against them. He then contested the leadership in 2020, losing to Ms Lee. Mr Hanson held the deputy leadership role and acted as leader while Ms Lee was on maternity leave, but last year was dumped in favour of Leanne Castley. Today, Ms Lee extended an olive branch to Mr Hanson.
If I am privileged to be leader, I would really like for Jeremy to play an a very, very important role in my shadow cabinet.
Ms Lee, like Mr Hanson last week, sought to downplay internal differences between Conservatives and moderates.
It's about making sure that Canberrans are getting the services that they deserve.
Former Liberals leader and Chief Minister Gary Humphries was less reserved in his comments.
She's more of a centrist, and I think that to win an election in the ACT, the Liberal Party has got to have a moderate-leaning leader.
The leadership and deputy leadership positions will be spilled at a party room meeting on Thursday, and it's not yet clear if anyone else will run. Ms Lee today wouldn't confirm whether she believes she has the numbers, saying only she'd had fruitful discussions with party colleagues who had expressed a desire for stability. If successful, and if she stays on for the full term, Ms Lee will become the Territory's longest-serving opposition leader. Lottie Twyford, ABC News, Canberra.
A child has died and 4 others have been severely injured after a car ploughed into a primary school campus in Melbourne. Police say the vehicle veered off the road and crashed through a fence at Auburn South Primary School in Hawthorn East this afternoon. 3 girls and 2 boys aged 10 and 11 were rushed to hospital, where an 11-year-old boy later died. The driver of the car, a 40-year-old woman who was picking up her child, has been arrested.
The 40-year-old female is in custody. She's been interviewed by detectives as we speak. It's a tragic circumstance. It's really tough for everybody involved, from the community, the school community, the locals, the first responders, AMBOs, police. It's really tough.
Consultants Think Garden have wrapped up their ACT Supreme Court case against the Canberra Institute of Technology over a cancelled $5 million contract. Think Garden's Patrick Hollingworth is chasing more than $3 million damages after CIT paused the contract pending a review by the board. Lawyers for the Institute have questioned whether parts of the claim are valid, including $48,000 for wages for 5 staff for 3 months after the contract ended. The court has been asked to rule on whether Think Garden is entitled to the rest of its money, despite the fact no further services were delivered. Justice David Mossop has reserved his decision. Israel's parliament has all but banned the main UN relief agency in Gaza from delivering life-saving aid into the enclave. The chief of the United Nations says the move could have devastating consequences for the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians facing starvation.
Generations of Palestinians have called this place home. 16,000 live in the Shafat refugee camp in East Jerusalem. A community built and supported by UNRWA for decades. It was already challenging for their staff, who provide services including healthcare and education, to come and work here every day. Israel's parliament now making it impossible, banning it operating in Israeli territory.
Anyone who acts like a terrorist has no right to exist in the state of Israel. UNRWA is not an aid agency for refugees, it is an aid agency for Hamas.
In January, Australia joined other nations in pausing funding to UNRWA after Israel claimed the agency had employees involved in the October 7 terrorist attacks. 9 staff were fired, but a UN investigation was unable to independently verify the intelligence used by Israel to make the allegations. Australian funding resumed in March, this ban opposed by the government. The Foreign Minister posting on social media, UNRWA does life-saving work. UNRWA is the biggest provider of aid in Gaza, support which has already been reduced to a trickle. The UN's top humanitarian official has warned that the entire population in the north is now at risk of dying. Israel's ban could make it impossible for UNRWA to operate there.
You won't be able to move in Gaza without being subject to possible attack. There'll be no visas for international staff, no work permits. Supply chains will fall apart.
You guarantee more children being killed. And I'm sorry for the lack of diplomacy in my language, but I think we've moved past the idea of sugarcoating this. We will simply see more little girls and boys in Gaza unnecessarily killed.
The legislation approved by the Knesset comes into force in 90 days, a time frame which has been designed to give Israel an opportunity to make new aid arrangements for the Palestinian population. Israel's parliament backing this proposal before that crucial detail had been sorted out.
UNRWA simply must be replaced. They must be replaced with other organisations that are not infected with terrorism.
There's nobody that can replace them right now in the middle of the crisis.
Added pressure from its strongest ally, Washington today reminding Israel of an earlier threat to cut US military aid if conditions in Gaza aren't addressed.
Passage of this legislation could have implications under US law and US policy. That remains the case.
Tough talk that's done little to sway an emboldened Israel.
And a short time ago, our Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran filed this update from outside UNRWA's headquarters in Jerusalem.
Well, this legislation makes it illegal for Israeli officials to deal with UNRWA staff. The agency may try to get aid into a place like Gaza, but the IDF controls all of the entry and exit points into that territory, meaning getting the permissions and the permits required simply will not happen. And while Israel insists someone else will be able to fill the void, we do need to point out that UNRWA has been operating in this space for decades. It was set up in 1949, and replacing the huge amount of infrastructure it has and the large number of people it has will be very difficult, if not impossible, certainly within the time frame Israel has set itself. We do also need to note that this decision by the Knesset puts Israel further at odds with countries it considers its allies, its partners, its backers, and it raises questions as to how countries such as Australia deal with Israel into the future. For all of the rhetoric that's coming from Washington and Canberra insisting Israel guarantee the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, this decision by the Israeli parliament shows that Israel is prepared to ignore those demands and act as it pleases.
Matthew Doran reporting from Jerusalem. In the United States, Democrats have stepped up their attacks on Donald Trump after a comedian opening a rally for the former president called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. In a rare move, the Trump campaign has distanced itself from the remarks. With just over a week before Election Day, the fallout underscores the importance of the Latino vote in the crucial swing state of Pennsylvania. North America correspondent Jade McMillan is there and reports from the city of Erie.
Just a few months ago, Joe Biden was a candidate in this election. Instead, the president lined up in his home state of Delaware to cast an early ballot for his deputy.
And this is your ballot. You can step right on the floor.
Joe Biden also using the opportunity to weigh in on a scandal on the other side of politics.
It's just simply embarrassing. It's beneath any president.
Donald Trump's campaign has tried to distance itself from a comedian's remarks at the former president's recent Madison Square Garden rally.
There's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico.
A spokeswoman for Mr. Trump said the comment didn't reflect his views about the US territory, while his running mate tried to play the whole thing down.
I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the joke, but I think that we have to stop getting so offended at every little thing in the United States of America.
People living in Puerto Rico aren't allowed to vote in presidential elections. But in the critical state of Pennsylvania, more than 50% of eligible Latino residents are of Puerto Rican descent.
He said a lot of things about Latinos coming from South America through the border. So, it's just, it's people, I guess, are used to, his behaviour.
Kamala Harris's campaign has seized on the opening.
They want a president of the United States who's about uplifting the people and not berating, not calling America a garbage can.
With just over a week until Election Day, both candidates are spending most of their time and money in the 7 states where the race is considered to be competitive. Today it was Georgia and Michigan, but they'll be in Pennsylvania later this week, and it could be the biggest prize.
Erie County in the state's northwest has picked the winner at every presidential election since 2008.
And he did nothing for us, so we have to give her the opportunity to show us.
I just don't like his delivery system sometimes. He's very brash, and that's fine. That is who Donald Trump is.
A battleground within a battleground that could prove decisive. Jade McMillan, ABC News, Erie, Pennsylvania.
As tales of survival go, this one is right up there. Matilda Campbell was trying to retrieve her phone while bushwalking when she fell head first between boulders and became wedged upside down. Today she reunited with her rescuers.
It was the impossible rescue
That's what I'm saying, this could be pushed over.
that made headlines around the world.
Rescuers in Australia had to work for hours to free a young woman who wound up stuck, wedged upside down between boulders.
Yeah, you can just see her feet there.
I mean, this story is just unbelievable.
But it was the scary reality for Matilda Campbell trying to retrieve her phone.
About like an hour in, when they first come in, I had already noticed that the graze on my side was starting to hurt because that was the side that I was laying down on. And there was sticks in my hair, there was dirt everywhere, like I could see spiders in the distance.
The 23-year-old's friends called emergency services, who came in droves.
Nice work, guys. Probably towards the more halfway mark, I was like, oh, I'm not getting out. I haven't said goodbye to anyone. I haven't said I love you to my family. But then through, I don't know what I was thinking, I just somehow knew that I would be okay from like the team.
Crews had to remove 7 boulders, each weighing between 80 and 500 kilograms, to gain access to Miss Campbell. A wooden frame was built above her to prevent rocks from falling.
I'm 30 years with VRA, and there's been a lot of difficult rescues in that time, but never someone down in the crevice of a rock that's wedged upside down 2 metres down. No, that was a first for me, for sure. The fact that somebody was there with her to raise the alarm, that's what saved her life.
After 3 days in hospital, Miss Campbell was finally able to thank her saviours.
Wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them, so I'm really, really thankful. Phones are replaceable, but your life isn't. So I would never, ever, ever go into a dangerous place trying to get your phone.
A lesson learnt the hard way. Lillian Watkins, ABC News, Rutherford.
The Prime Minister has tried to rebuff suggestions he sought flight upgrades directly from Qantas CEO Alan Joyce. But having failed to answer questions about his dealings with the airline boss and attacking others, he remains under scrutiny from the opposition. Here's National Affairs Editor Melissa Clark.
More questions, but not much clarity.
Did you call Alan Joyce personally for these upgrades?
Look, the idea Qantas have a number in terms of bookings that are made private bookings.
When he was Transport Minister and later Opposition Leader, Anthony Albanese received flight upgrades for personal travel to Rome, LA and London. A book by a former Nine newspaper reporter says he liaised directly with CEO Alan Joyce about it. But when pressed, the Prime Minister could only recall discussions about other flights.
I recall direct discussions with Alan Joyce over the flights, the Emirates or Qantas flight to Dubai.
And he went on many other tangents. He attacked the author of the book.
I don't see declarations that he's a former Liberal Party staffer.
He pointed to other MPs declaring flight upgrades.
Paul Fletcher's been upgraded at least 69 times.
He compared his declarations to those of the opposition leader.
I don't have a family trust. I don't have any shares.
And compared their travel arrangements.
I didn't have to declare any flights on private jets owned by billionaires like Gina Rinehart because I haven't engaged in it. As simple as that.
Except last year he did accept a private helicopter flight from trucking magnate Lindsay Fox. For all the retorts, exactly how Anthony Albanese secured those upgrades still isn't entirely clear.
He can throw mud, he can blame other people, but this is a problem of his own making.
And the opposition leader is questioning whether any of this influenced the government's decision last year to block Qatar from offering more international flights.
I think the Prime Minister should take the initiative to refer this matter to the Integrity Commission.
A spokesperson for the Prime Minister calls that suggestion a pathetic attempt at creating a headline. Melissa Clark, ABC News, Canberra.
The Australian Army has shown off the first of its new multi-billion-dollar Blackhawk helicopters. At Sydney's Holsworthy Barracks, Special Forces demonstrated the capability of the new aircraft before flying them towards the city. 40 of the American-made helicopters will replace the European-designed Taipan fleet, which was grounded following last year's deadly crash off Queensland. Next month, Special Forces will conduct counter-terrorism training on board Black Hawks around Sydney Harbour. The Pentagon says Washington will not impose new limits on Ukraine's use of American weapons if North Korea joins Russia's war. The Pentagon estimates 10,000 North Korean troops have been sent to eastern Russia for training. NATO says some units are already in the Kursk region of Russia near the Ukraine border. The organisation says Pyongyang's involvement in the war represents a significant escalation.
The deepening military cooperation between Russia and North Korea is a threat to both the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security.
Myer is set for a merger in a deal worth almost $1 billion. The department store wants to join forces with a company that owns chain stores Just Jeans, Portman's and JJ's.
Many people know Myer for its perfume counters and its long history in Australia.
Familiar landmark, Myers of Melbourne is one of the big six in world retailing.
However, these days, the retailer has been struggling with its profit margins, and younger Australians like Shay and Delora are shopping online instead.
Not a lot of range. I don't think that I'm their target market.
Now Myer is betting its future on a merger.
This is about ensuring that Myer, which is 125 years old, can continue to be a sustainable business.
The deal would see Myer buy up 5 retail chains, including Just Jeans, Dotti and Portman's. All of these are brands that are currently owned by Solomon Lew's Premier Investments.
I'm personally very excited by this transaction and will be joining the board of Myer as well as remaining its chairman of Premier Investments.
The deal is worth almost $1 billion. It still needs sign-off from the consumer watchdog and shareholders.
We're going to vote for the merger. We believe that the merger is transformational.
This retail analyst says the deal is a dud.
Trying to bridge the gap from 13 or 12 up to 80 is problematic. What I would do is I'd rebrand Myer.
Myer's pushing ahead with this merger at the same time that another Australian legacy retailer has collapsed. The owner of Rivers, Noni B and Katie's just entered voluntary administration, which is putting 3,000 jobs at risk.
I think it's dead and buried. I'd be surprised if someone tried to resurrect it.
Tough times for retail prompting major mergers. Amelia Terzon, ABC News.
To finance now, and the Australian dollar continued to fall today, but the local share market managed its third consecutive rise. Here's Alan Kohler.
Financial markets are betting that next week's election will see the return of inflation and a limit on further US rate cuts because both candidates plan to lift the budget deficit with spending and/or tax cuts. So the US dollar is rising, and the Aussie dollar has dropped 5% in a month to 65.6 US cents today. Here's a chart of US government debt as a percentage of GDP since the War of Independence. Apart from World War II, it's the highest it's ever been. And here's what the Congressional Budget Office is predicting will happen based on existing policies before the election promises increase it some more. The share market rose 1/3 today, led by banks and miners and Premier Investments, which is selling 3 of its retail businesses to Myer. Guess which company investors think is doing better out of the deal? Premier is up 10%, Myer down 1.6%. And here's a chart comparing the share prices of Myer and Premier over the past 10 years. Myer has halved, Premier has tripled. Its market value is now more than 6 times that of Myer. And that's because Premier's profit margin is close to 10%, while Myer's is 2.3%. Now, today's deal is complicated, but basically Myer is issuing shares to Premier in return for Just Jeans, Dotti, JJ's and some cash. And Premier Solomon Lew ends up with 26% of Myer and goes on the board to teach them how to make a margin of 10%. They hope. Most global markets went up today, apart from China's. Oil fell a bit more and the iron ore price jumped 2.5%. Oh, and tomorrow is quarterly CPI day. which will decide if and when we get a rate cut. The RBA is looking for 3% headline, 3.5% core. If it's less, happy days. And that's finance.
To sport now, and in soccer, a spectacular goal from Kyra Cooney-Cross has helped the Matildas upset Germany 2-1 in Duisburg. The world number 4 Germany took an early lead in the friendly international. Australia answered with a long-range strike from Cooney-Cross in the 39th minute. It was her first goal for the Matildas. Claire Hunt also scored her maiden international goal as the Matildas beat Germany for the first time in 19 years.
I couldn't stop thinking about it after I scored. It just feels a big relief. I think we've all been waiting for this moment for a long time, and it's finally happened, and especially on my 50th game, so it's even more special.
In soccer, there's been a Spanish double at the Ballon d'Or Awards in Paris. Manchester City midfielder Rodri took out the male footballer of the year ahead of Brazil's Vinicius Jr. Barcelona's Aitana Bonamati won the women's Ballon d'Or for the second year in a row. In basketball, the Canberra Capitals start their WNBL campaign on Sunday, and this season has a hint of years gone by. While the Caps squad is almost completely unrecognisable from last season, the head coach is no stranger to Canberra or success.
Paul Goris knows a thing or two about winning WNBL championships with the Caps. This season, the highly successful coach is back in the top job.
Our goal is we want to win every game that we go into play.
Despite having a young and completely new squad, Goris is dismissing suggestions the club is in a rebuilding phase.
A rebuild is excuse making for losses, and I haven't come here to lose. These players haven't come here to lose.
Nicole Munger and Jade McMillan are the only 2 players returning from last season, and the majority of the squad, like Chantel Horvath, have never played in the competition.
Always aspiring to one day play in the WNBL and play for the Capitals, so it's really cool that I'm here now.
We're realistic about what kind of group that we have, that we are young, we do have some inexperience, but we knew that right from the very get-go.
Goris is also the assistant coach of the Atlanta Dream in the WNBA and has brought a flavour of that competition to the club, recruiting 2021 #1 draft pick Charlie Collier.
Fitted in great. It's like she's literally been here from day one or from last year, and I think that's the commitment to the group and to her.
In another throwback to the glory days, the Capitals are once again calling the AIS Arena home. It's where they won their last WNBL title in 2020.
Our last memories were winning a championship on that court, so it'll bring back great memories for me personally.
It's a full circle moment for me, and I'm really excited to play on that arena.
Their season starts in Sydney on Sunday before they return home to a crowd that's already almost sold out. Early signs show the Caps can go back to the future. Anthea Beveridge, ABC News, Canberra.
To the weather now, and this observation of reflected cloud activity and the seasonal turn of foliage sent in by Kent Peters. Email your best photos of Canberra and its weather in landscape orientation to canberraweatherpics@abc.net.au. After a low of 6 degrees in the valley and 7 north side, Canberra enjoyed a warm and sunny day with a top of 26. Around the capital region, Batemans Bay enjoyed a sunny day with a top of 22. It was very breezy along the Eden coast, sunny and 25 for Yass and sunny and 14 for Thredbo. Across the nation, there were scattered showers over parts of Brisbane, stormy activity over Darwin, and it was mostly sunny for Sydney. The satellite shows cloud developing over eastern Queensland, northeastern New South Wales, Western Australia, far western South Australia and the Northern Territory's top end and southern interior in troughs, generating showers and storms. Cloud over western Tasmania and southern Victoria in cool, gusty southwest winds is bringing virtually no rain. Clear elsewhere in dry winds. Tomorrow, Darwin can expect showers and a possible storm. Showers for Brisbane, partly cloudy for Melbourne. Around the capital, after a forecast low of 8 degrees, Yass Valley can expect a partly cloudy day with a top of 27. Clear and 25 for Batemans Bay and 28 for Nowra and Albury. In the high country, Thredbo will range between 4 and a top of 15 tomorrow with plenty of sunshine. After a low of 7 degrees north side, Canberra can expect a partly cloudy day with 27 the forecast top. Light winds becoming north to northwesterly 15 to 20 kilometres an hour in the morning, then tending west to northwesterly 20 to 30 kilometres an hour in the early afternoon. The sun will rise at 5:58 a.m. and set at 7:36 p.m. Looking ahead, we can expect a partly cloudy run of days from Thursday for Halloween through to Friday. Cloudy on Saturday with a top of 25 degrees before a forecast top of 31 degrees on Sunday, and then 29 next Monday and 27 on Tuesday. And that's the latest from the Canberra newsroom for this Tuesday evening. I'm Adrienne Francis. Great to be with you. Stay with us now for 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson. Good night.